Welcome to Talk Treatises.
Hello.
Today we are embarking on a journey that might seem, at first glance, like a simple excursion into a dusty corner of Edwardian children's literature.
Right, seems very specific.
It does. But as any regular listener knows, the most profound philosophical inquiries often hide in the most unassuming packages. Our mission today, as always, is to treat the text with the rigor it deserves, not just as a story, but as a window into the human condition.
A very deep window.
We are looking at a book that, on the surface, is an adventure story, but underneath is a terrifying examination of how fragile who we are really is.
Precisely. We're not here to just recount a plot. We are here to dismantle an architecture of ideas. The text we are dissecting today is The Little Girl Lost, published in 1902 by Eleanor Raper.
Eleanor Raper.
And I have to say, when we first pulled this from the archives, I expected something quaint, a bit dated.
Sure.
I did not expect a text that essentially anticipates Sartre, engages with the Superior Wharf hypothesis on language, and deeply, deeply investigates the sociology of the self.
It hits hard. And before we get into the weeds of the narrative, let's set the stage, because context is absolute king here.
It's everything.
The year is 1902. The location is Peking, what we now know as Beijing. And this isn't just a travelogue setting, the timing is crucial. We are in the immediate aftermath of the Boxer Rebellion.
Right. And to really understand the stakes, we have to understand what that means. The Boxer Rebellion was a violent, anti-foreign, anti-colonial uprising that attempted to purge China of Western influence.
It was incredibly bloody.
Incredibly. The Boxers believed they were invulnerable to bullets. The siege of the legation quarter, where the Western diplomats lived, was a global news event. It was months of terror.
So in 1902, the relationship between East and West in China is, to put it mildly, fraught.
Fraught is a good word for it. It's a geopolitical powder keg. There's suspicion, there's trauma, there's resentment on both sides.
And in the middle of this powder keg, we have a text that is ostensibly about a child's abduction. But as we've been discussing in our prep for this deep dive, it's really about something much heavier.
Oh, much heavier.
It feels like a survival horror story wrapped in a velvet ribbon. But the horror isn't zombies or ghosts. It's the loss of self.
It is. It's a text on aesthetics, on the malleability of the self, and on the collision of cultures. It asks a question that philosophers have wrestled with from Locke all the way up to the existentialists.
And it's a terrifying question.
It is. If you strip away a person's environment, their clothes, their language, and their social standing, what is left? Is there an innate self, or are we merely reflections of the room we happen to be standing in?
That is the central problem we are going to unpack today. The protagonist, Nellie Gray, is 9 years old. She is removed from her cultural scaffolding, the British legation, and dropped into the chaotic, vibrant, terrifying reality of the Chinese city outside the walls.
And the speed with which her identity begins to dissolve, it's frankly terrifying.
It's so fast.
It creates a philosophical state of nature scenario. You have the legation quarter, which represents civilization, order, the known, essentially the social contract in microcosm.
Right.
And outside, you have the unknown, or the wilderness. The text posits that the human subject is incredibly vulnerable when that boundary is crossed, that our entire sense of self is propped up by these external things.
So our thesis for this deep dive is this. The Little Girl Lost is not just a survival story. It serves as a treatise on what we might call cosmopolitan stoicism.
I like that term.
It argues that while cultural identity is fragile and easily stripped away, there is a bedrock of human connection, empathy, shared metaphysics that transcends linguistic and cultural barriers, even in a state of captivity.
Cosmopolitan stoicism. I like that. It suggests that one can be a citizen of the world not by choice, but by enduring the collapse of one's own world with dignity.
Exactly.
Let's get into the text itself.
Let's do it. Let's start with part one, the protected self versus the world. We have to visualize this setting. The text describes the compound.
It's an enclave.
It's a walled garden. There are tennis courts, verandas, a little church. It's a slice of Victorian England transplanted into the heart of China. It sounds almost surreal given the context we just laid out.
It's a bubble. It's Plato's cave, in a way. The inhabitants see the shadows of China on the wall, but they don't experience the reality.
Not the full reality, no.
Nellie Gray lives here with her parents. Her father is the British minister. She plays the piano, though not as well as she should. The text notes, which is a charming little humanizing detail. And she exists in this hermetically sealed environment. It represents safety, but also, a kind of ignorance.
A profound ignorance of the world just a few feet away. And she has her circle of friends. There's Baby Buckle, Arthur McDonald, Bessie Bates.
The names say it all, don't they?
They really do. These names alone invoke a very specific type of British propriety. It's all very tea and crumpets.
Yeah.
But here is where the text does something interesting right away. It introduces the other within the walls.
Right. It's not a complete monolith. We have little Yi, a Manchu child, and the German Wolf sisters.
This is a crucial detail. The text goes out of its way to show us that children naturally bridge linguistic gaps. It's not a problem for them.
Not at all. You have Nellie, an English girl, playing with the German sisters Bertha and Liza. They don't speak the same language.
Not a word in common.
And Bertha only knows the Chinese word pu for not. That's her entire vocabulary outside of German. And yet they construct a friendship.
They communicate through nods and shakes of the head. The text explicitly says that they get on very well without chattering.
Without chattering, I love that.
It suggests a pre-linguistic universalism. Before we are taught to be English or German or Chinese, we're just human.
Yes. It's almost a critique of adult diplomacy, isn't it? The diplomats are in their offices arguing over treaties and borders, using very precise language, and getting nowhere.
While the kids are just nodding at each other and getting along perfectly.
Exactly. It's the state of nature before the corruption of Babel. They haven't been taught to hate yet. They haven't been taught to build walls with words.
But this paradise is fragile. The narrative pivot happens when Nellie and little Yi decide to leave the gate.
The transgression.
It's always a gate, isn't it? Or a wardrobe or a rabbit hole. In this case, it's the main gate of the legation. Nellie thinks she is going to meet her father. The gatekeeper has stepped away for a moment.
Just a momentary lapse.
It's a lapse in security. But philosophically, it's the expulsion from Eden. It's the moment the bubble bursts.
And notice the immediate consequence. The moment they step outside, they lose agency. Inside the compound, Nellie is Nellie Gray, the minister's daughter, a subject with rights and status.
She has a name, a role.
Outside, she becomes an object. She is surrounded by a crowd. The text describes rude boys asking questions, laughing at them. She becomes the object of the gaze.
That concept of the gaze is so important here. She is no longer an individual. She's a curiosity. She's a spectacle. Her foreignness is her only defining feature.
And then comes the trap. They are rescued, or so they think, by an old woman named Kunainai. She seems kind. She shoos away the crowd.
A classic fairy tale setup.
She takes them into her house to escape the noise and stares. And what does she offer them?
Sugared walnuts.
The sugared walnuts. It's the Turkish delight in Narnia. It's the pomegranate seeds in the myth of Persephone. It is the sensory pleasure that seals the entrapment.
It's fascinating how often folklore and literature use food as the mechanism of bondage.
Well, it's the most basic form of trust, isn't it? Accepting food from a stranger. Nellie eats the walnuts, and the door is locked. The transition from free agent to captive is sweetened, but it is absolute.
And the environment inside this Chinese house is an immediate shock to the system. The text spends a lot of time describing the Kang.
The stone beds.
The stone bed with the fireplace underneath, the paper windows, the scrolls on the wall that to Nellie look like flies on a cake.
I love that simile. It's so visceral.
It is. Her frame of reference is struggling to map this new reality. She's trying to use her British vocabulary to describe a Chinese interior, and it's failing. It's not just different, it's alien.
This is the beginning of the dislocation. She interprets the aesthetics of the room as wrong or dirty or strange because they don't match her template of home, but the real horror sets in when they realize they aren't going home.
Not for dinner, anyway.
They are introduced to the antagonists, the old woman, her son Hong Li, and the daughter-in-law On-Ching, and they are subjected to the logic of the captor. Kunainai says it is their custom to keep found children until they can be handed over.
Which is a polite, almost bureaucratic way of saying held for ransom.
It frames kidnapping as a social norm, which is deeply unsettling. But let's look at the classification of the other here. The text presents this taxonomy of women based on their feet. This fascinated me when I was reading it.
It's so specific and so telling.
It is a fascinating aesthetic obsession in the book. You have the Manchu women, like Little Yi and her mother, who have unbound feet, natural feet.
The big feet, as they're called.
Then you have the Chinese women, like On-Ching and Kunainai, with bound feet described in the text as claws.
A really aggressive, animalistic word.
And then you have the Westerner, Nellie, with her large feet. It's physical anthropology through the eyes of a child. and it's all about status and identity.
It really highlights how the body becomes a site of cultural enforcement. To Nellie, the bound feet are monstrous claws. To the Chinese characters, Nellie's feet are absurdly large and, unfeminine.
There's no neutral body here. Every physical trait is political. It reminds you that beauty standards are entirely arbitrary constructs.
Absolutely.
And the text notes that On-Ching, despite her bound feet, has a cosmopolitan soul, but we'll get to her later. Right now, the girls are trapped. And little Yi, the Manchu girl, she's savvier than Nellie in some ways. She tries to use superstition to escape.
This part is brilliant. She tells the captors that foreigners can take out their eyes and teeth.
Referring, of course, to glass eyes and dentures, things that would have been completely alien technology to them.
It's a clash of epistemologies. Little Yi tries to weaponize the otherness of the West, making the Westerner seem like a supernatural monster to scare the captors. She says Nellie will die and haunt them as a ghost. It's a clever ploy for a child.
It is. She's leveraging the xenophobia of the captors against them. She understands the gaze of the captor better than Nellie does. She knows they see Westerners as demons or ghosts, so she plays the demon role.
But Nellie, and this is the stoic part we mentioned, she refuses to lie. She's crying, she's terrified, but she says, "I am a Christian. We don't die on purpose to haunt people."
She clings to her moral code even when it's tactically disadvantageous.
That is the first test of her character. The environment has changed, the threat is real, but the internal moral compass holds steady for now.
For now is the key phrase.
But let's move to part 2, the malleability of identity. Because the physical stripping of the self begins the very next morning. They wake up on the stone kang, stiff and sore. Nellie looks for her clothes, her dress, her petticoats, the armor of the Victorian child.
All the symbols of her station.
And they are gone.
Replaced by Chinese garments. Blue cotton trousers and a coat. This is the first step in the erasure of Nellie Gray. Clothes are not just fabric. They are signals of status, gender, and nationality.
And they take away her shoes and stockings. She has to go barefoot.
It's a humiliation, a stripping of dignity. But it goes deeper. They bring in a barber.
The shaving of the head. This scene is visceral. Nellie is held down effectively, and the front of her head is shaved, while the back is braided into a long queue.
We have to pause on the significance of this. Hair is a massive marker of identity across all cultures. The queue, or pigtail, was the mandate of the Qing dynasty, a symbol of submission for Han Chinese men.
So by imposing it on her,
by shaving her head, they are ritualistically removing her Western identity and submitting her to the local order. The text asks us to consider, once Nellie looks Chinese, does her internal status change?
The text suggests a dissonance, a growing gap. Nellie is praying Christian prayers inside, but on the outside, she is indistinguishable from a local child.
The mirror no longer reflects Nellie, it reflects a stranger.
And then the text introduces its most innovative argument. And this is where I think Raper was way ahead of her time. Linguistic atrophy.
This is the part that I find most chilling and most brilliant.
Me too. It's unforgettable.
Nellie begins to forget English. It's not immediate, but it happens with terrifying speed. She struggles to remember the word for stockings.
Right. There's that scene where she's trying to think of it, and all that comes to her is the Chinese word "watsu."
It implies that language is not a permanent possession. It's not something you own. It's a social contract. If there is no one to speak English to, the English self begins to wither.
It completely challenges that great man idea of identity, where you are, who you are, regardless of where you are. It suggests we are permeable, we are porous.
Exactly. The self is constructed through dialogue with the other. When the other changes, when the language of that other changes, the self changes too. Nellie is becoming Chinese not just aesthetically, but cognitively.
Her internal monologue is being colonized by her environment.
That's a great way to put it. If she stays there long enough, she won't just look Chinese, she will think Chinese. It touches on the Superior Wharf hypothesis that the structure of a language determines a native speaker's perception and categorization of experience.
So she loses the English words.
She loses the English concepts. The entire framework for her reality starts to crumble and get replaced by a new one. The word for stockings is just the first brick to fall.
And all the while, she's classified by the world around her as a curiosity. The gaze of the Chinese characters views her as a ghost or a source of bad luck. But she's also an economic unit.
Which is key.
This brings us to part 3, the ethics of captivity. We have to talk about Hung Lee.
Hung Lee is the antagonist, the embodiment of avarice. To him, Nellie is not a human being. She is a lottery ticket.
A commodity.
She is a commodity.
Yeah.
He views the children solely as ransom objects. He doesn't hate them, per se. He just wants to liquidate them for cash. He's a businessman, and they are his inventory.
Which is almost worse than hatred. It's pure, cold indifference. He drags them on this miserable journey to his home in On-Ching, and the description of the travel is claustrophobic.
It's awful. They are in a cart, which is described like a large, arched traveling trunk. The curtains are pulled down. It's a sensory deprivation chamber.
Why do you think that detail is so important? The curtains being down.
Well, this sensory deprivation is a technique of control. If you don't know where you are, if you can't see landmarks, you cannot escape, you are untethered from geography, your entire world shrinks to the inside of that cart.
It's a psychological prison as much as a physical one.
They travel for days, sleeping on kangs, eating rice, bouncing in this dust-filled cart. It is a physical grinding down of the spirit. The text emphasizes the dust, the heat, the lack of view. It's about shrinking the world of the captive until their only reality is the will of the captor.
And yet, Nellie adapts. This is the resilience the text celebrates. This is the stoicism. She doesn't succumb to despair. She creates a routine.
And this is where she starts to push back in small ways.
She teaches On-Ching to knit using chopsticks.
That detail knitting with chopsticks is a perfect example of what we called cosmopolitan stoicism. She takes the tools of her captivity, the chopsticks, and uses them to recreate a domestic art from her home, knitting.
She's synthesizing her two worlds.
She is. She imposes her own order on the chaos. She asserts her agency through creation. It's bricolage. She is building something new out of the broken pieces of her old life and the materials of her new one.
Let's talk more about On-Ching. She's the daughter-in-law of the kidnapping family. She has bound feet. She's oppressed by her mother-in-law, Kunai Nai, and her husband, Hung Li. But she becomes Nellie's ally.
On-Ching represents the oppressed helper archetype. She is bound by custom, quite literally, by her feet and by her marriage. She occupies the lowest rung of the hierarchy in that household. She has no power.
But she finds a way to exercise a different kind of power.
She does. The text attributes to her a natural curiosity and kindness. She rejects the master-slave dialectic. She doesn't treat Nellie as a prisoner. She treats her as a friend, a person. She's fascinated by her.
They form a bond through shared suffering. Nellie teaches her English words, and Ching protects them from the worst of the family's cruelty. She sneaks them better food.
It's a relationship of equals that defies the power dynamic of the situation. And it's fascinating that the text allows a friendship between the captor class and the captive. It refuses to paint the Chinese characters as a monolith of evil.
That's a really important nuance.
It shows that the system of kidnapping is evil, but the individuals within it can still be humane. And Ching is a victim of the same patriarchal feudal system that is currently victimizing Nellie. They recognize that shared victimhood.
And it sets the stage for the introduction of the true hero of the story.
The Good Samaritan.
Part 4.
Yeah.
The Cheshire Cat moment. I love this description in the book. Nellie is sitting in the courtyard of Hung Li's house, feeling hopeless. It's been months.
She's at her lowest point.
She looks up at the wall and she sees a head. Just a head, smiling down at her.
This is Chang. And the reference to Alice in Wonderland is deliberate, I think. He is a figure of whimsy and magic in a stark, brutal reality, but he is also a figure of profound philosophical weight.
He isn't just a nosy neighbor.
No, he is the bridge back to civilization.
Because of what happens next. They start talking very quietly over the wall, and then Chang begins to sing. He doesn't sing a Chinese folk song. He sings the hymn, Art Thou Weary?
Art thou weary? Art thou languid? Art thou sore distressed?
It's the turning point of the entire text. This is the argument for universalism in action.
Absolutely. You have an English child and a Chinese man separated by a wall, separated by race, by language, by the whole history of the Boxer Rebellion. But they share a metaphysics. They share the logos.
The text argues that this shared belief creates an instant bond stronger than proximity, stronger than tribal loyalty. Chang helps them not because he knows them or because they're from his village, but because they are part of the same spiritual community.
It's a very specific claim that ideas, shared ideas, bind us closer than blood or geography.
It's the breaking of the state of nature. The legation quarter was a physical bubble of safety. But here, in the middle of hostile territory, they create a metaphysical bubble of safety through the hymn.
It validates Nellie's internal identity just as it was about to vanish. When she hears that song, she remembers who she is. It's an anchor.
And then we get into the mechanics of the rescue, which are just delightful. The intelligence of the rescuers versus the brute force of the captors.
Right. It's a battle of wits.
Jang creates a communication system using red paper and a pebble.
So simple, so clever. It's primitive, but it's effective. It bypasses the surveillance of the captors. And we have to mention Chang's son, Chi Fu.
The scholar.
He's the scholar. He represents reason. Hung Lee represents brute force and drunkenness. The text is very clear in this dichotomy. Reason and strategy will ultimately triumph over brute force.
Chi Fu plans the escape. He uses the Romanized alphabet, ABCs, to write a letter for Nellie, because he knows the Chinese captors can't read it.
It's the weaponization of knowledge, using a different script as a form of code.
It's also a reversal of the linguistic atrophy we talked about earlier. Nellie is forced to reclaim her language to survive. She has to write to her father.
She has to remember who she is. She has to dig deep to find the words she was forgetting. The act of writing becomes an act of rebellion, an act of self-reclamation.
So we move to part 5, the journey home. The escape plan is set. They're going to be hoisted over the wall in a basket at night. But then, disaster. Hung Lee returns early.
The plan is ruined, and the benevolent kidnapper scenario we might have entertained falls apart completely. Hung Lee decides to move them to sell them somewhere else.
And here we see the collapse of his economic machinery. He has treated these children as commodities, as livestock. But his actual livestock, the mule pulling the cart, fails him.
The death of the mule. It's a tragic moment, actually. The text says Nellie cries for the mule. She has more empathy for the animal than her captor does.
But it's symbolic. The brute force that drives the kidnapping machinery literally drops dead in the road.
And this forces them to stop. It forces the confrontation. But before that, we have another layer of identity manipulation. To escape detection on the road, On-Ching dresses little Yi as a boy.
So we've had Nellie turn into a Chinese girl. Now we have little Yi turned into a Chinese boy. The text is just constantly playing with the fluidity of presentation.
To survive, you must be able to shift your shape. Gender, like nationality, becomes a costume you wear for survival.
It's the ultimate test of the malleable identity thesis. If you can change your hair, your clothes, and your gender presentation, what is the immutable core?
The text seems to say the immutable core is your loyalty and your voice. And it leads to the climax, which I think is one of the most poignant, most heartbreaking scenes in the literature of this era.
It's incredible. The father, Mr. Gray, has gotten the message. He is riding down the road. He is looking for his daughter.
He is desperate to find her. He has men with him. They're on a rescue mission.
And Nellie sees him. She runs out. She is standing right there on the road in her Chinese clothes with her shaved head. And he rides past her.
Let's unpack this. He rides past his own child. Why? Because he's looking for an English girl in a frock and bonnet.
He has a mental image.
He has a template. And she doesn't fit it. He sees a Chinese child with a shaved head and a queue. His perception is filtered through his cultural expectations. He does not recognize his own flesh and blood because the external markers are wrong.
It's devastating. The protected self we started with, a Nellie Gray at the compound, is so gone that her own father can't see her. It proves that our recognition of others is largely, maybe entirely, superficial.
We see the costume, not the person.
She has to assert her identity vocally. She screams, "Father!"
And that voice, the voice that sang the hymn, the voice that prayed, the voice that taught On-Ching English words, that is what cuts through the disguise. The visual fails, the auditory succeeds.
He turns back. He recognizes her voice. And then he sees her. It tells us that the visual world is deceptive, but the voice, the logos, the word is true.
A powerful, powerful argument.
The reunion is emotional, of course, but the resolution that follows is fascinatingly transactional. We have the restoration of order. Hung Lee is caught. But he isn't beaten up. He isn't thrown in a dungeon immediately.
No, it's an economic resolution, which is strange to us. Mr. Gray effectively buys On-Ching from him.
He pays 50 taels. He buys her freedom.
It's a strange moment for a modern reader. We want justice, we want punishment, but the text gives us commerce. Hung Lee is punished by losing his property, his wife, and gaining a smaller sum than he wanted for the ransom. But On-Ching is liberated.
And the Gray household absorbs On-Ching. This is the new synthesis. The compound was a closed system at the start of the book.
Totally sealed off.
Now it has integrated the other. On-Ching comes to live with them. She goes to England eventually.
The walls have become porous. The text argues for progress through cultural integration. Chi Fu, the scholar's son, gets help to continue his studies. On-Ching becomes a Christian. It's a very optimistic, if, slightly colonial view of the world.
It is a product of its time in that respect.
But it suggests that while we can lose our identity, we can also expand it. Nellie is no longer just English. She has survived China. And Ching is no longer just Chinese. She enters the West.
So we've tracked Nellie from the tennis courts to the Stone Kang and back again. She has been stripped, shaved, silenced, and disguised. She has forgotten her language and remembered it. She has been ignored by her father and rescued by a stranger.
And through it all, she survived because of that cosmopolitan stoicism. She maintained an internal order when the external world dissolved into chaos.
That brings us to the end of the narrative arc. But the philosophical implications of The Little Girl Lost don't stop when the book closes. The questions it raises about memory, identity, and ethics are timeless.
They certainly don't. In fact, they get more complicated the more you pull at the loose threads.
Which brings us to our favorite segment of the show.
Indeed.
It is time for our thought experiments.
Always a pleasure.
A quick disclaimer before we jump in. The following segment is for entertainment and educational purposes only. We are going to explore some outlandish but plausible scenarios based on the text's logic. Do not try these at home, and please do not kidnap anyone to test a philosophical hypothesis.
Please don't. The ethics board would never approve it.
All right. Experiment number 1. I'm calling this the ship of Theseus identity paradox, or the total assimilation scenario.
Lay it on me.
Okay. The text shows Nellie forgetting the word for stockings after only a few months. She's already losing her English. Now imagine the rescue was delayed, not by a day or a week, but by 10 years.
10 years. So she would be 19. She grows up in On-Ching. She goes through puberty there. She becomes an adult.
Exactly. Nellie remains in the village. She forgets English entirely. She forgets the tennis courts, the piano, the hymns. All of it is gone. She marries a local man. She has children. She adopts the culture perfectly. She is, for all intents and purposes, a Chinese woman of that village.
Okay. So she has no memory of the legation, not a single trace.
None. A complete wipe. Then, at age 19, her parents find her. Through some miracle, they track her down.
This is where it gets messy.
Here is the question. Is she still Nellie Gray? If consciousness is constructed by language and memory, and she has lost both, has the original Nellie effectively died? Does the biological link to the parents carry any philosophical weight if the software of the mind has been completely overwritten?
This is a classic problem of personal identity. John Locke would argue that identity is based on the continuity of memory. If she has no memory of being Nellie Gray, then she is not Nellie Gray.
So the person is gone.
The person who is Nellie Gray has ceased to exist, and a new person inhabits that body. To drag her back to England would be, in a very real sense, to kidnap this new woman from her home and her family.
So the parents would be rescuing a stranger.
Ontologically, yes. They would be rescuing a stranger who happens to share their DNA. But the text suggests something else, the him factor. Is there a spark, a soul, a cosmopolitan essence that remains dormant? If they played the piano, would she remember? Is there a deep structure that survives?
It's the born identity question. Is the skill set still there, buried deep down? But if we accept the blank slate theory that the text flirts with, that we are primarily reflections of our environment, then yes, Nellie Gray is dead.
And the rescue would essentially be a kidnapping of this new woman, dragging her back to a culture she no longer recognizes, to be with parents she doesn't remember.
That is a disturbing thought. You rescue her, but you are actually destroying the person she has become to try and revive a ghost.
It posits that rescue is subjective. If she is happy in the village, is she lost?
Exactly. Is she lost because she doesn't know where she is, or because her parents don't know where she is?
Deep. It forces us to ask if home is a place or a memory. If you lose the memory, can the place still be home?
I don't know the answer to that. All right, let's pivot to experiment number 2. I'm calling this the utility of the benevolent kidnapper, or Hung Lee's wager.
I'm intrigued. Hung Lee is not exactly a benevolent figure in the text. He's pretty awful.
No, he's greedy. He's motivated by pure avarice. But look at the facts. He finds the children in the street. They were surrounded by a mob. The text says the crowd was gathering, rude boys were laughing. In the aftermath of the Boxer Rebellion, for 2 foreign children, that was a dangerous situation.
It was a volatile state of nature. Yes, they could have been killed. A xenophobic mob is not a rational actor.
Hung Lee, via his mother, takes them in. He removes them from that chaotic, dangerous street. He keeps them safe. He feeds them. He shelters them. Yes, he makes them sleep on a stone bed and takes their fine clothes, but he keeps them alive. And eventually he facilitates their return for a profit.
I see where you're going with this. You're asking if a utilitarian would consider him a moral agent.
Exactly. Suppose a hardline utilitarian philosopher looks at this situation. Can an act motivated by vice pure greed be considered virtuously utilitarian if the outcome survival is better than the alternative, being lost in a riot?
It's the moral luck problem. Does the intent of the kidnapper matter if the result is the preservation of life? A Kantian would say absolutely not. He treated them as a means to an end, a tool for profit, not an end in themselves. Therefore, his actions are immoral, full stop.
Or utilitarian.
A utilitarian looks at the spreadsheet of happiness and suffering. Option A, kids left in the street, high probability of being hurt or killed. Net utility, very negative. Option B, kids kidnapped, frightened, uncomfortable, but fed and returned alive. Net utility, less negative, maybe even positive if you consider their whole lives ahead of them.
So option B produces more utility.
It's uncomfortable, but yes. If the motive is irrelevant to the outcome, Hung Lee is the savior of the story. He is the mechanism by which they survived the mob. His greed was the engine of their preservation. If he hadn't wanted money, he might have just left them there to their fate.
So, in a twisted way, his avarice saved their lives.
It suggests that in a chaotic world, sometimes a predictable vice, like greed, is safer than an unpredictable chaos, like a mob. A rational bad actor is better than an irrational situation.
Because you can negotiate with greed.
You can negotiate with greed. You can't negotiate with a riot.
You can negotiate with greed. That is a thought to chew on. It complicates the villainy quite a bit.
Indeed it does. It makes him less of a monster and more of a logical, if immoral, opportunist.
Well, on that morally ambiguous note,
Yeah.
we have reached the end of our journey into The Little Girl Lost.
It's been a fascinating trip, a lot to think about.
We've gone from the tennis courts of the legation to the dusty roads of On-Ching. We've seen how fragile our civilized identities are when stripped of their props, our clothes, our language, our families.
And we've seen the optimism of the text. The belief that bridges can be built over walls, literally and metaphorically, through shared songs and shared humanity.
It's a story of peril, yes, but it's also a meditation on what it means to be human in a world of others. It asks us, and you listening, to look at how we construct our own identities. Are we who we are because of our souls, or just because of our clothes and our zip codes?
And perhaps it's a reminder to check who is standing on the other side of our own walls. What shared language, what shared song might we be missing?
And maybe, just maybe, learn a hymn or two in another language. You never know when it might come in handy.
Or at the very least, carry some red paper and a pebble, just in case.
That too. Thank you for joining Talk Treatises.
Thank you.